Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of committee. Welcome to this morning's Heritage Kingston meeting. Mr. Chair, I do note that we have, I believe we have eight members of the committee. No, seven members. Seven members. Yep. Would you like to give a minute to see if we gather a few more, or would you like us to proceed?
We've only heard from Councillor Oosterhoff, is that right?
That is correct.
So, yeah, so maybe if we can wait a minute. What's the time? It's right on 9:30, so if we can wait a minute to see if any of the other three appear. Right on time. I would think that's fine, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'll just get us started by letting everyone know who is in the meeting with us this morning. We do have quorum this morning. Currently absent from committee members are Councillor Doherty and Councillor Oosterhoff. Joining us from staff are Jennifer Campbell, Director of Heritage Services, Andrea Gummo, Manager of Heritage Planning, Ryan Leary, Senior Planner, Philip Perrell, Intermediate Planner. Ian Sullivan is our meeting host for today, and I'm Elizabeth Fawcett. I'm Committee Clerk for Heritage Kingston. We also have a number of applicants and agents in the meeting to assist with the files, and we do not currently have any members of the public in the gallery at this time, but I will keep you updated, Mr. Chair, as we go along. With that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. So I'll call the meeting to order at 9:33. Start with the approval of the agenda. I notice they are all part 4, so we don't have to even remember as we make the change. Additions to the agenda, and seeing none, and a mover to approve the agenda as printed. Don Mitchell, seconded by Jane McFarland. Thank you. Further discussion? And seeing none, you have an agenda. The minutes of June 15. Thank you, Ted. I have not heard any amendments, any changes, any corrections. So I'm looking for a mover for the minutes as printed. Jane McFarland and a seconder. Don Mitchell, thank you. Are there any comments on those minutes? Don Taylor? You're muted at present.
Not on the minutes, but I don't think we voted on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. We will go back and vote on the agenda then. We have an unamended agenda as printed. Those in favour, if you can raise your hand or say yes. Thank you. Aye. I see all and hear all. Thank you very much. So apologies for that. On to the minutes. Are there corrections to the printed minutes that were distributed? And if not, then moving for the minutes as distributed. Move. Ted and a seconder. Don Mitchell, thank you. Any discussion on those minutes? And seeing none, then those in favour of those minutes as distributed?
Aye.
And I see everybody present voting in favour, so we have nobody against. Pecuniary interest, disclosures of pecuniary interest, Jennifer?
Yeah, on 1216 Unity Road, I'm the agent of record.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And as ever, my comment that if you suddenly realize you are involved in an application, please say so as soon as you can, and we can deal with it then. Otherwise, Jennifer will actually, I'll just be part of the discussion, but not voting in that session. I don't believe there are any presentations, and interrupt me if I'm wrong here, delegations, briefings, business of cultural heritage, policy development, or heritage assets, which brings us down to stat business, 4255 Bath Road. And Ryan, I believe that's you.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of committee.
Morning.
This is my file, correct? This is 4255 Bath Road. Can we get the next slide, please? So the subject property is located on the west side of Bath Road. It's on the north side of Homeward Avenue, near the western limit of the municipality. The property is designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act. Next slide, please. So the property is known as the Aiken House. It was designated in 2017 as a property of cultural heritage value. The designation bylaw is in your agenda, but the heritage attributes that are applicable for today include the 1.5-story limestone dwelling with its symmetrical facade, low-pitched gable roof and chimney at each end, and the 1.5-story summer kitchen addition with medium-pitched gable roof and stone chimney. And its visibility and legibility from Bath and Homeward Avenue. Next slide, please. So what we're looking at today is an application under Section 33 of the Heritage Act to request approval to add a single-story addition to the side rear of the historic stone dwelling. The proposed addition is approximately 180 square meters and located with its front wall in line with the rear wall of the stone dwelling on the north side. It's a little difficult to tell, but you can see on the image at the bottom of your screen how far setback it is. The addition is proposed to be 1 story with glazing patterns that are meant to create a balance and match with the existing south wing of the main dwelling. A gabled pediment dormer will provide additional light into the front main room of the addition. And the addition will be clad in white horizontal wood siding on the front elevation and vinyl on the sides and rear elevation. Standing seam profile metal roofing in a color that matches the rest of the house is proposed. One rear window of the stone dwelling is proposed to be lengthened to accommodate an internal door between the house and the addition. The plans are in your agenda package prepared by Lakeside Drafting and Design, as well as a written overview, a really cool scale model, and pictures all prepared by the owners. So in terms of our review, the subject property, as you saw by the first image, is 2 acres in size or 0.8 hectares with a slight rise in elevation, and the historic dwelling is located on the highest part of the property facing the water, and it is over 80 meters or 260 feet from Bath Road. The main dwelling is a 1.5-story tall with a gabled roof and 3 dormers. The south frame facing Bath Road and the southern frame addition, which could possibly be a remnants of an earlier dwelling, links the stone dwelling with the 2-car garage addition located to the rear. The frame addition is also 1.5-story, but at a lower scale, and includes 2 new dormers that were added through heritage permit in 2019. According to the submission, the owners are intended to construct this barrier-free accessible addition so they can allow family to use the main house, and they will reside in the new addition. The owners have lived and cared for this property for over 40 years, and with the help of Lakeside Design, have designed a large single-story addition that reflects the character of the main house and the southern wing in its profile, design, and materiality, and located in the rear, to the rear of the property. The cladding materials proposed for the new addition horizontal wood siding and steel roofing reflects the material use on the southern addition. The height and pitch of the roof of the new addition also matches the southern addition, while the use of a central gable pediment allows the building to be clearly distinguishable as a modern intervention. We commend the applicants on their intention to reflect the glazing size and pattern of the southern wing. However, the large multi-pane windows seem unnecessary and draw undue attention away from the heritage attributes of the property. The stone heritage building has a vertical emphasis in its fenestration design that should be continued in the addition. So the applicants have agreed to modify the pediment windows to reflect this, and you can see it in the revised plan below on the screen. The owners wish to have large windows in order to enjoy the views of the water to the east, which we can certainly appreciate. It's a gorgeous view. And the staff and committee members who attended the site suggested that to retain this view and perhaps allow it to be less obstructed with the mutton bars. The best solution is to create 4 windows on the ground floor, either in the form of 2 double windows or 4 separate sash windows, each with less glazing bars, mutton bars. The responding committee members suggested 2/2, 3/3, or 4/4 glazing patterns for these windows, and perhaps a 2/2 pattern for the pediment windows. Staff have included a condition of approval. It's actually condition 5 and 6 in their proposed recommendation that requires the owners to amend the plans to use windows with a vertical emphasis and to alter the ground floor window design and to provide details to staff for review and approval. The applicants have chosen to locate the new addition not only to the side and rear of the historic dwelling, but also not only to the side, but also to the rear and as far back as possible, with its primary elevation actually in line with the rear wall of the historic dwelling. Given its setback of over 80 meters from Bath Road and being placed behind the garage addition when viewed from Homeward Avenue, the addition will have very little visual impact and prominence on the stone building, and from either the southern elevation or the western elevation. As a form of cost savings, the owners are proposing to use vinyl siding on the rear and side of the new addition. And while staff support the idea of proposed by one of the committee members that the siding should be wood on all sides, given the location and limited visibility of these elevations, we have no objection to the use of vinyl on these elevations as proposed. We have included a condition to allow the option of either for these 2 elevations should the applicants choose. So we did circulate this application. Building, of course, requires building permit. They also asking for a septic review to ensure its capacity for the addition. Engineering have no concerns, but note that any changes to grade on the property should not affect neighboring properties. Similarly, environment had no concerns. They state their usual note about requiring designated substances to be identified on site prior to construction. And our colleagues in planning have no concerns, but note that a hard surface pathway is required to access the second unit, excuse me. This was also circulated to committee members. Your comments are summarized and attached in Exhibit D, and our analysis included response to those committee members. So, Mr. Chair, next slide will be our recommendation, which includes a number of conditions. And I believe there's also a second slide that has additional conditions. Yep. and we're available for questions. Thanks.
Good, thank you very much, Ryan. Committee members wishing to make comments here? Don Taylor.
Yes, I think the plans are good and we can be pleased with them. I still think the applicants should consider less or fewer panes on the front windows, as I think Brian suggested. Most of them are 6/6, which could be confused with original windows that are shown on the main house. So I think the suggestion of 4/4 or 2/2 should be considered, but it's, I think it's up to the applicants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Others wishing to comment? And seeing none, I'm just going to make a comment, which I don't think needs giving up the chair. Recommendation 8. Sorry, condition 8 brings up, this is the storage of stones. And in this particular case, the applicant has got lots of space on that lot for the storage of stones. But we have talked this, I've talked this with a number of members of the department, and we really should look carefully when we make those recommendations as to where people can store stones or brickwork or whatever else we suggest. In this case, it's not a problem, but I would hope that at some point that sort of recommendation can be discussed. Otherwise, you have, unless there are any further comments from committee, members of the public, I know the Arnolds are here, who wish to make comments. And seeing none, then I'm looking for mover and seconder for this motion. Moved by Don Taylor, and the seconder, Jane McFarlane. Discussion, anything you wish to add to what's already been said? And seeing nothing, hearing nothing, the motion then is a recommendation with 11 conditions and no changes have been made. Those in favor, if you can raise your hands, please.
Aye.
Or speak. Thank you, Ted. Those opposed? And that carries by 9-0. So thank you very much. Arnold's, thank you very much, and best wishes with your project. We move on to 27 Princess Street. Philip, I believe this is you.
Hello, everyone. Through Mr. Chair.
Good morning.
Good morning. Awesome. Slides are up. So 27 Princess Street is a Part 4 designated property that seeks to add new signage. Next slide, please. 27 Princess Street is located on the northwestern corner of the intersection of Ontario and Princess Street, as you can see in these two pictures here. Next slide, please. The property has an impressive 4-story limestone commercial building with a mansard roof and a rounded corner designed by George Brown. This proposal is related to the ground floor tenant whose business is accessed by the rounded corner entrance and uses the 4 associated rounded bay windows, 2 of which face Princess Street and 2 face Ontario Street. And you can see these windows in the slide above. Next slide, please. Excuse me. The property is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and has the following relevant attributes. The building is a fine example of a large commercial building on an important corner. The wing at the intersection is one of the 2 remaining rounded corner commercial buildings in Kingston designed by George Brown, and the windows have rounded arches. Next slide, please. Excuse me. The business has been working with staff since late 2021 to refine and redesign their decal signage to the final iteration proposed in this application. The current design, with its matte finish, pale color palette, nearly uniform color, and subtle leaf imprints, does not draw a lot of attention and are a neutral impact to the heritage value of the building. The proposed decals will not cover the most distinctive part of the windows, which are the rounded arch window panes with its 6 lights. Further, they should not encroach onto the window trim and should be an easily reversible alteration. To conclude, while this is an alteration to the bottom exterior of 4 very visible windows along 2 major facades, these decals are a temporary installation and should not cause any permanent damage while allowing the business to advertise its commercial use. Next slide, please. And here is the recommendation for this proposal, not a super detailed one with most of these standard conditions. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good, thank you very much. There was a second slide there. You've got 10 conditions, I believe. No, I'm sorry, you've got the 4. My apologies. Good, thank you, Philip. Committee members, comments? Last time of asking. Okay, thank you. Members of the public, comments? And I believe there are no members of the public, agents, others, and hearing none. Back to the committee for a mover and a seconder for approval and any changes that you need to make. Don Mitchell, Paul Banfield. Discussion. And seeing none, then I will call the question. If those in favor can raise a hand or speak out.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Those opposed? And that carries again by a 9-0 vote. So thank you very much for that, Philip.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On to 73 Arlington. And I believe, Andrea?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair.
Oh, there you are. Good. Yes, you're going to do this since we've lost Alex.
Exactly. So it is a little unusual for me to be presenting one of the files and for it just to be my opinion. But in this case, because sadly Alex has left us, I picked this up from her. So next slide, please. So this context map shows the location that we're talking about. 73 Arlington is on Arlington Avenue, close to the corner of Union. This image is interesting too, because it shows the subject property on the left, and then on the right, you can see the designation, which applies to the subject property and its original principal dwelling part of the property. So this used to be all one property. This is an area of the city where there are quite a few heritage resources, but no specific direction for how new development needs to happen. Next slide, please. This shows the current view of the coach house that we're talking about this morning, as well as the principal dwelling to the left. This image shows really clearly the relationship between the two, although somewhat obscured by vegetation. You can definitely make out there that you have a large brick Victorian principal dwelling at 77 Arlington on the left, and then the smaller coach house on the right, which is now 73 Arlington. This was separated in 2010 through a severance application with the intent of building an infill dwelling on the property containing the coach house. Next slide, please. So the original designation from 1978 still applies to the subject property. It is primarily focused on the principal dwelling at 77 Arlington. And you can see here it's recognized for its materials and its design. Next slide, please. So associated with the severance that happened in 2010, there was a need to update the understanding of the cultural heritage value of these properties. And so that was done. And essentially what it says is that the value remains essentially the same, but it has been somewhat lessened because the primary value of this coach house is its association with the principal dwelling at 77 Arlington. So by severing those two properties, that link is also somewhat severed. Okay, great. I also just want to mention that the heritage value of both of these parcels continues to be essentially the same as when they were originally identified in the 70s. It really is about the structures, but then also the extensive landscaped grounds. So this is one of the designations that includes some consideration of mature landscaping as well. And I guess just to sum up, importantly, severing this property really has diminished its contextual value in terms of the function and the expectation that a new dwelling will be introduced. Next slide, please. So this image shows the current proposal facing Arlington Avenue. I do want to point out that this rendering of the design, it at first glance can be a little bit deceiving just because it almost appears that the garage portion is set back, which would be ideal. But in fact, what's been proposed is that it's set just slightly forward. And the report for this goes into more detail about sort of the considerations here, but essentially what has been proposed is acceptable, although could be improved by moving that garage portion back slightly, because it helps maintain the prominence of the link between the principal dwelling house and the coach house. As you come along Arlington Avenue, you can clearly see that the two continue to be related to one another. And the view is a little bit longer. So in the proposal here, you have to get up pretty close to the coach house to see that relationship. The protruding garage does somewhat diminish that view. However, this is in an area where we expected an infill dwelling, and it's also acceptable what's been proposed. I also just want to point out that the coach house in this case is a little bit unusual. Generally speaking, as sort of a principle, we look to see additions onto heritage structures to be very much subordinate. But in this case, a coach house is inherently meant to be subordinate itself. So to have a dwelling attached to it, one would expect some prominence for that new dwelling. Next slide, please. And this shows all elevations of the proposal. I think this really helps to see how the garage portion is coming out a little bit. You can also see how the entryway portion in between the coach house and what's proposed as the new garage is recessed slightly, which is beneficial to help maintain the form of that coach house. Okay, and next slide, please. We have quite a few here's our recommendation. So we are recommending that this proposal be approved. Part of the proposal, of course, is rehabilitating the existing coach house. Next slide, please. And there are quite a few conditions here, 10 conditions. These conditions ensure that all of the heritage considerations are subject to a little bit of an additional analysis by staff as they come in for further refinement of the proposal, but they do allow the flexibility for the applicant to build what has been proposed. So essentially, our recommendations have acknowledged that we believe this proposal could be improved by making some adjustments, and these recommendations or conditions would also allow some of those adjustments to be made, but they also confirm that what has been proposed is acceptable. And that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much, Andrea. So committee members, comments, questions? Don Taylor.
I think this is a rather challenging application, and I guess I'm also surprised in that there's a really overwhelming comments from members, from heritage planners, and from every heritage set of guidelines that you can find, that the new garage wing should not be forward of the heritage building. And to me, that's such a fundamental thing that I have serious problems with this application. And I guess my first question is, why did staff recommend approval against the comments of all the committee members and against the comments of the heritage planners and against the guidelines for heritage renovations?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I guess a few things. So we have recommended a number of the comments that came through from responding members of Heritage Kingston to the applicant for their consideration. We have also, as staff, made a number of recommendations based on the policies and guidelines that are in place. But the applicant would prefer to continue with their proposed design. And in this case, there is not a lot of guidance for what the new build needs to look like. And that is intended to provide flexibility. They've proposed a modern design, which is entirely acceptable. And so in this case, what they've proposed is acceptable.
Don Taylor, comment?
Well, just to add on that, my previous comments. I mean, certainly there's a lot of flexibility in the design. I think I think in my own comments, I certainly felt that the design was basically okay, but there were some problems, and the main problem is the projecting garage. I believe that if someone driving up Arlington Avenue will not see the coach house, it'll be hidden by the new garage wing. And, you know, surely the underlying principle of heritage renovations and additions is that you do not obstruct the heritage building more than absolutely necessary. So I'm sorry, I have to disagree with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jay McFarlane.
Okay there, good morning. I have 3 concerns regarding this application. Number 1, the location of the proposed garage. The staff report notes that the statement of cultural heritage significance identifies the coach house as visually and historically associated with the adjacent property and the principal dwelling due to common architectural style. And as well, the subject property is considered to make an important contribution to the character of its surroundings. The staff report also refers to the 2015 design guidelines for residential lots, which discourages the domination of a front facade by garage doors and recommends that proposals recess garages behind the front facade. As well, in that 2015 design guidelines do not project the garage from the front face of the house and do not add prominent attached garages on streetscapes where they do not previously exist. A quick survey of Arlington Avenue, I noted only 1 garage extending beyond the front facade of a house and only by a few feet. The staff report also references the 2021 Central Kingston Growth Strategy, conducted to ensure appropriate development in existing residential areas. The staff report does not include the following specific information on neighborhood guidelines for neighborhood group 4, which includes the Arlington district. Notably, quoting, garages should be visually minimized, located in the rear yard or set back from the main front wall of the home. In addition, general heritage considerations from the Central Kingston Growth Strategy provides guidance as well. New additions to protected heritage properties should be subordinate in scale, massing, and design to the heritage building and located to the rear wherever possible. If a new addition must be located to the side of a protected heritage property, it should be set back from the front wall of the heritage building in order to allow the heritage building to maintain its prominence on the property. The concept rendering does not adequately illustrate how far the garage proportion of the house of the proposed addition extends beyond the front of the heritage coach house. But in fact, examining the site with house drawing, the new garage will extend 10 to 12 feet beyond the front of the coach house. And as noted in the staff report, the proposed new dwelling both envelops the coach house and includes a garage addition that is set forward, which obscures the legibility of the coach house and its relationship to the principal house. My concern number 2 is protection of mature trees. Although maintaining the mature trees and hence mature landscaping on the south side of the lot behind the new garage was part of the rationale for having the garage so far forward in the lot. The staff report notes that consultation with forestry, the trees are unlikely to be able to survive the construction of the dwelling due to their proximity. There's only a 5-foot setback from the lot line where 2 of the mature trees are located. So construction will be very difficult there and compromise the integrity of those trees. My concern number 3 is alterations to the coach house itself. The plans for the coach house, one of the few remaining coach houses in Kingston, are concerning. Staff note that the coach house, constructed in the 1870s, is in relatively sound condition. In this proposal, please be aware that 2 door openings will be filled in and a new opening will be created. The coach house doors will become windows, and a large portion of the decorative verge board, which is a heritage attribute, will be removed from public view. Altering existing openings and making new openings are not supported by standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places. Worth noting with these plans, none of the main floor existing openings of the coach house remain. In fact, the essence of the coach house will not be conserved. This project to the coach house is not supported by general standards 1, 3, 11, and 12. Because of these concerns, I will not be able to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Further discussions, comments, questions? Jalinka?
Hi. Yeah, I agree with the other committee members in that the one item in what the city says they approve is that it complements the coach house. I do not think it complements. I'm not a fan of hyper modern, ultra modern homes being interjected into old neighborhoods. I used to live in Coburg, and there's one street where you have all these houses are from the 19th century, very historical, and then you just have this modern house in the middle of it, and it's very jarring. And I think that this is going to happen with this. You're going to go up the street, and all of a sudden, bam, there's this hyper modern house with a tiny little coach house, and it's going to detract from the appeal that Kingston has. You know, the limestone city. You come to Kingston for the first time, and you're going up and down the streets, and you see these beautiful homes that have all this character. This new addition has, in my opinion, zero character. With all the glass, it does not complement at all. And in that way, I disagree. If there's some way that the facade of the new home can be changed to complement, to marry and take some of the historical significance from the home and from the coach house, and change some of the elements to make it match a little bit better, make it feel like it belongs there rather than just like plopped out of nowhere. So, and that I disagree with the plans as is.
Okay, thank you very much, Jalinka. Dodd Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I just have a question for staff. I'd like to talk about the 3 adjacent properties that are very close to the sidewalk in terms of setback. If I read correctly, I know the side setback on this project, it has a question mark. The projection of the new garage in relation to how far forward you're allowed to come to the property line or to the sidewalk setback, and also comments on those other 3 properties might help context where that garage front is kind of floating.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So the entire proposal is still set back from the property that is to the right, if you're looking straight at the proposal. This is a streetscape where we see a huge variety of setbacks, and that's in part due to the various areas of construction that happened around here. So historically, this neighborhood was associated with originally Portsmouth Village and then the rural area between Kingston and Portsmouth. And so through the 1900s, 1800s, we saw a lot of grand houses being built here because it was sort of the rural estate associated with Kingston or with Portsmouth Village. since we've had an amalgamated city that covers this entire area, this neighborhood has really continued to fill in. And so now we see a huge range of styles and eras, and there really is no defined streetscape in this location. The garage itself comes about to the bay window of the property of the house adjacent. So it is kind of set back still behind that one next door. I trust that's helpful, but I'm happy to take any follow-up questions.
Don, does that?
I just have
Yeah.
one follow-up, which is what I'm really looking at is it is as of right where it is, as opposed to requiring a variance for any kind of front yard setback.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Great question. We do have a little bit of question on this one, whether it does meet the as of right permissions, but we do know that in terms of where that garage is, it is close. The piece that I'm not sure about is driveway length. I'm thinking they may, through planning, need to look for some relief there, or possibly in the end to meet that as of right setback, move it back a little bit. Those are kind of options that I think would be permitted by this approval.
Okay, Don. Good, thank you. Janine? You need to unmute. Janine has disappeared from my screen. Come back to Janine if we can. Jennifer.
Hi. So yeah, I guess the projection as well, I have a bit of a problem with. Just Googling the minimum sizes for a one-car garage, and I have here between 12 and 16 feet wide. I see the dimension on the carriage house as 15. So I'd be wondering, I know in the proposal it says it's too small for like a modern garage, but I mean, it seems like it could actually work as one, even if it is smallish. And that could possibly solve some of the issues there. I do agree and disagree about the modern aspect. I think you can do a good modern addition, but I think yeah, it's hard. I noticed, I think one of the things we're probably noticing is just like a lack of detail in sort of the addition itself. And I think a lot of ways that you can begin to sort of reference the original building is through sort of a modern reinterpretation of those details, whether it's like a headers over the garage door or those openings, the stuff that starts to sort of complement the existing, but like with a modern twist on it. I think that would sort of help soften these two sort of contrasting elements. But yeah, those are my comments.
Good, okay, thank you. Janine, you had a comment? You need to unmute. Oh, Janine's having problems here. Oh, Janine.
Mr. Chair, I'll just note that Ms. O'Reilly is participating via phone, so she just needs to press *6 to unmute.
There she goes. Janine.
Janine, you look like you are off mute if you wanted to start speaking to see if we can hear you. There may be an issue with her audio.
Okay, and I will remember to come back to her when we do the discussion on motions and see if we can get in touch then. So members of the committee, Andrea, you had an answer first of all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Through you, as I'm kind of continuing to process some of the comments, I just wanted to mention one thing in terms of the policy context here. So it is important to remember that this is very different from where we have a heritage conservation district, where there are firm policies that guide development, in particular infill development. What we have here is essentially no policies guiding new development, but we do have a number of guidelines that are applicable. And by their nature, guidelines are written well, sometimes they're written with language like should, it's best to do this. And what that does is it sort of makes it clear that while this is considered an ideal situation, it's also not required. So there is a lot of thought that goes into this overall policy framework in a situation like this, where there's a number of kind of encouraging guidelines. But that is quite a bit different from strict requirements. So I wanted to highlight that difference. And of course, I'm happy to provide any further detail on that point if anyone has additional questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, Councillor Doherty. To put this up to 10. We are on 73 Arlington, by the way, Councillor Doherty. Further questions, comments by members of the committee? And seeing none, members of the public, and I know Catherine Stone was asking to comment at one point. Catherine, are you with us, and do you want to make a comment at this point?
Yes, I'm here, and I would like to comment.
Okay.
On behalf of the client, I think when, first of all, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Okay, good. When you're looking at a project like this, you forget that the end user, the person who's going to use this home and is going to put a lot of funds into it to make it into a custom home. And they have a lot of things that they put forward to us when we work on the design of this. So first of all, to Jennifer's point, the garage or the carriage house is not deep enough for a modern car. That was tried and it didn't work. The garage projecting forward, this was done specifically to, if you like, block the neighbor view somewhat. They do not take care of their home. I hope they don't hear this, but if they do, maybe they will. And they don't want to see that. And looking at the sight lines on the street, that is why we positioned it where it was. The accessory building, which is the carriage house, if you look at the main house it was once attached to, we are the same distance back with the garage. The garage comes forward the same way it did on the original house. And it does not block your view when you're coming up, when you're coming north on Arlington, because the house next door to it is in front of that and almost hits the sidewalk, as many of the homes on that street do. Let me see what else I was going to answer to. The presence of it, if you look at the peaks do match in their shape, and the garage is recessed underneath what is a balcony, if you like, off the front garage. And this is specific to the client's needs. They have family members who live overseas and come for a month at a time to visit family. This is going to be a family home. And so this was to give them a respite from family, as I have lived this, when you need a break. And that was why we positioned it over the garage as a separate wing in the house. And the garage door is recessed underneath that overhang, so it's not prominent, it's also dark. So I thought, based on the streetscape, it had its merits to move it forward and not push the whole proposition to the back. The backdrop was specifically made so that the carriage house would stand out, and I think it has done that.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine. Other members of the public? And seeing none, then we move on to making a motion and discussing the motion. Do I have a mover for the approval of 2073 Arlington? And you don't all have to rush. Don Mitchell, seconder. Seconder for the motion. And Madam Clerk confirmed to me that when I do not get a seconder, the motion does not get dealt with any further and is considered defeated.
Mr. Chair, it's a bit of a different situation just because this is just to get discussion going. We cannot have further discussion without the motion being on the floor. So again, the mover and the seconder is not indicating for or against. They are just allowing for the discussion to occur.
Okay, Jennifer, are you seconding? Yes, okay, we have a seconder then. Don Mitchell proposing and Jennifer as a seconder that the motion with 10 conditions be approved. So discussion on the motion, which is unamended. Anybody wish to add further comments? And seeing Don Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, these are really tough ones. I came very settled and read up in the direction of Jane and Don Taylor. But also my reading, I do think it comes down to that balance. And I think when you do go down the street and you see the prominence of how far forward the other buildings are, and when I look at the way that the heritage structure is pocketed behind the protruding new garage in relation to the existing house, believe it or not, for me, and it's subjective, I actually see that it creates a separation that actually attaches that heritage structure to the original property that it was severed from. So I'm going to side with experts and city staff that all of us have suggested we prefer it was further back. But at the end of the day, I think it's really close in the way it kind of achieves this. And there's lots of language even in the district plans about, infill surrounding a heritage structure and how you get that separation. I think largely it achieves differentiating the new from the old. It really sets that heritage structure up. And really, in my mind, particularly as you're going north, it does actually put it back to the original structure. The real contrast there to me, and the forward actually sets the new portions of the building with the other three adjacent properties. So I'm going to suggest that I would prefer it was set back like everyone else, but I'm prepared to, depending upon what other people say, see it go forward as it is now. I'm concerned about the loss of the trees in the backyard, and I think there is that tension between the whether or not that landscape language is specifically describing this property, the two properties together, or the one that's been severed. I think that to lose the trees in the backyard is a shame. The backyard's been hoarded a little bit by the new design, whereas the original property, that landscaping would have been more available to the public. Those are my thoughts at this point, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Going to try Janine again. Janine. And not being able to hear you, unfortunately. I'll go on to Jane McFarland and come back to you if we can, Jane.
Yes, thanks. Just want to go back to the point of Central Kingston strategy guidelines is to ensure appropriate development. And I still want to say that I think that a garage extending 10 to 12 feet in front of a heritage building is not appropriate development. I'm still concerned about the protection of the mature trees. I think a different design might enable those trees to remain. And I'm super concerned about the alterations to the coach house. Again, we are taking a coach house and basically changing it. It's one of the few existing coach houses in Kingston. I think we need to preserve that and have an appropriate development back of that coach house and attached to it by perhaps using one of the existing openings already. I still can't accept this proposal. And today we are voting here to approve what is proposed, not what we think might be nice or what we think that the developer and the applicant will decide to do, but what is actually proposed on paper. And I cannot vote for this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Others wishing to speak on the motion as moved and seconded? Don Taylor?
Yes, just some follow-up comments. Andrea explained that there are guidelines which we all are aware of that suggest the garage should be positioned further back, but they don't say they must. They say they should. And I think I see a problem with how staff, heritage staff, and other staff perhaps function in this. They can talk to the applicant and say, yeah, the garage really should be further back, but it doesn't have to be. And then the applicant says, no, I want it where it is. And staff take the view that they cannot refuse unless there's a very definite guideline saying must rather than should. But we as a committee have a different view of things. We are an arm's length community committee that's supposed to be sensitive to the what is desirable in a neighborhood and desirable in a alteration. And I think it's really, speaking for myself, no question this application should be refused. I'm sorry that the applicants didn't see fit to make some modifications to deal with the projected garage, but I think the as it stands, I have to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Janine, going to try you again. And I don't think we're getting through to Janine. And Jennifer, I'm not sure that staff can join in during discussion on a motion. I've had this question before and never thought that unless it's an error that we have been making.
If I may, I'd like to remind the committee that criticism of staff and their professional opinions are not part of the discussion that's held at committee. Recommendations from staff are subject to expertise, code of conduct policies, and also often licensing and legal regulation. So I would just like to remind the committee broadly that certainly staff represent an opinion on these matters. We are not saying that a committee cannot have alternate, differing, or subjective interpretive considerations. But I just do want to remind and assure staff that their interest and representation here is professional, and that is where it comes from. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Janine, one last chance. Can we get contact?
Mr. Chair, I have received a note from Ms. O'Reilly that she is not intending to comment. She's just having a bit of a mix up with her technology. So Ms. O'Reilly, I'm just right now, Ms. O'Reilly, I'm going to lower your hand. Your hand is now lowered, and so that should hopefully avoid some further confusion.
Good, thank you very much. So committee members, last chance. And seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. It is for 3 parts and 10 conditions on 73 Arlington. So those in favour of the, there are no amendments. So those in favour of the motion as printed, if you can raise your hands, please. And those opposed to the recommendation, if you can raise your hands, please.
Opposed.
And I believe that is 9, oh, the 10, sorry, Councillor already done there. I believe that is lost 0 to 10. I'm not sure whether Janine's hand is raised. And Madam Clerk, you can call that 0 to 9 with one not voting if you wish. But the motion is defeated. Thank you for your time on that. We move on to Ryan. And Jennifer, you now become an agent and are not voting, etc., etc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome back.
So, yeah. So this property is at 1216 Unity Road. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. This is on the north side of Unity Road, east of Glen, Burnie, in the rural part of Kingston. The next slide, please. The property is known as the former Glen Burnie Methodist Church. It contains an 1857 limestone former church building with a 1957 Sorensen designed modernist addition, connected by a single-story link addition. The property was designated in 2020 under Part 4 of the Heritage Act. Some of the relevant attributes include the one-story rectangular church structure, constructed of rough-faced limestone and its medium-pitch gable roof with simple brackets, and the modern rectangular structure with arched roof located east of the church, built in 1957. The single-story rear addition and link structure, which is the subject of the application today, primarily between the stone church and the modern structure, are not noted as heritage attributes, and the bylaw is included in your agenda package. Next slide, please. So what we're looking at today is an application under Section 33 of the Act to request approval to alter a number of the existing exterior door and window openings on the lake addition. This is the south elevation, so specifically on the south elevation, and of course the south elevation faces the road. It contains a single steel door with narrow side lights flanked by large double casement windows and one smaller single casement window. It's proposed to have a large central 4-panel glazing sliding door or French doors. It flanked by reinstallation of the existing double casement windows. Next slide, please. The west wall, which we're looking at here, is west elevation, sort of tucked in behind the stone church, as you can see the bottom right. It currently contains a 2-panel sliding door and a single sash window. The proposal is for a sliding patio door to be reinstalled in a new opening, more central opening, and the existing window on the right to remain. And then a second window is proposed on the opposite side of the door, which will be a horizontal sliding window. Next slide, please. And this is the north elevation, so the back of the building currently contains one 3-part window and one sash window. A new central partially glazed door is proposed with 2 horizontal sliding windows on one side and a double fixed window on the other side. And the next slide, please. So this is a view from above. This is a floor plan, sort of site plan drawing. The owners wish to install finally some anchors for a seasonal sun sail, sort of a canvas covering. It's going to be a gray beige color. It's to be above the southern courtyard. So the courtyard right in the middle of your screen is the one that's on the south face of the building looking at Unity Road. The deck and patio is to be improved to make the deck approximately 1 meter wider and 3.5 meters longer than the existing covered porch currently. The covered portion of the porch is not to be changed. So the detailed plans that we're looking at are prepared by our own Jennifer Demeter for Fabrique Architecture and Art Limited, and a cover letter and photograph prepared by the owners, and that's all attached in their application. So in terms of our review, the subject application includes a series of alterations to this later 1-story Lincoln and rear additions located between the stone church building and the modernist church hall addition that are attributes of the property. The Lincoln addition was built sometime in the mid to late 20th century and is not noted as an attribute. However, of course, alterations to these type of features could have a negative impact on the overall character and attributes of the property. The majority of the works to the windows, doors, siding, roofing, penetrations will be out of view from the public realm on elevations not visible from Unity Road. Further, these interventions will only impact the link addition and will have no physical impact to the identified attributes of the property, the church or the hall. The use of the vinyl products for the alterations on the Link Edition to replace existing vinyl and metal products is appropriate in this situation. The alterations proposed to the west and north elevations will have no impact on the cultural heritage value of the property. The most visible alterations proposed will be the changes to the southern entrance openings, the new sun sail, and to a lesser extent, the enlarged front deck patio. Currently, the church appears to have three main front entrances when you see it from the road. The church itself, the central porch, and the hall entrances. The proposed changes to the central porch feature will give the central porch of this building a private courtyard appearance, and thus draw one's attention to the historic main doors of the church, and maybe a lesser degree the hall, and away from the central one. By making this central entrance appear more like a private space and clearly distinguishable as a contemporary intervention, the culturally significant portions of the property will be highlighted and more readily identifiable and in line with good heritage conservation practices. The sun sail is a temporary feature anchored only by 2 points in the mortar joints of the stone building and 1 point in the hall building, and removed in the off season. Similar to retractable awnings or freestanding shade structures, the sun sail will have only minimal temporary impacts on the visibility of certain heritage attributes, being the stone wall and fenestration on one side of the church building. Further, the enlarged deck and sun sail will be set back approximately 3 meters from the face of the hall and over 4 meters from the face of the church building itself, allowing those portions of the building to retain their prominence on the property. So this application was circulated. Building noted that a permit is required, and that septic review will be underway for a lot of the interior innovations that go along with these exterior changes. Committees submitted their comments, which we've summarized in Exhibit D of this agenda, and no significant comments were expressed by committee members. So our last slide should be the recommendation. And I believe that's the entire motion in front of you, Mr. Chair, and we're available for comments, questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I finally worked out what you mean by 3 entrances to the church. It suddenly dawned on me that you count that. Okay, committee, questions, comments, thoughts? Aha, we've worn you out. Am I right in seeing nobody at all? Tell me if I am wrong. Members of the public, including Jennifer, any comments? And again, seeing none, I believe, Madam Clerk, are we still without members of the public?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
Who you
okay.
see on your screen is in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. So go on to a motion. Do we have somebody willing to move the printed motion, which is 1 paragraph long with 5 conditions? Looking for a mover. And I see Jane McFarlane looking for a seconder. And I see Don Taylor. Further discussion on the motion as printed? Seeing none then. Oh, sorry, Don Taylor.
I think this is quite acceptable. The proposed changes really have no impact at all on the heritage attributes of this property, and so I think that's fine. Normally, we don't feel very good about vinyl products, but these are alterations to a building that is to a part of the structure that is mostly vinyl, and so one might as well carry on with that. So I don't think the committee should have any problems with this. I certainly don't. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Others, last chance. Otherwise, the motion as printed and as was on the screen, moved by Jane McFarlane, seconded by Don Taylor. Those in favour, if you can raise a hand or speak.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, there is a hand. 6, 7. I think we're okay. And those opposed? That goes 8-0 as carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jennifer, who can now join the meeting. Thank you, Ryan. And Philip, we move on to you.
Hello again, Mr. Chair.
221, is it? Yes, 221 Queen.
Yes, sir. Okay, so this permit for 221 Queen Street is to install 2 signs, one at the intersection of Queens and Clergy Street East, and one visible from Coburn Street. Next slide, please. 221 Queen Street is located on the northeastern corner of the intersection of Queen and Clergy Street East and is kitty corner to St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, as you can see in the pictures above. Next slide, please. The property is a 3-story limestone Gothic style church with a 5-story bell tower. And at this point, I wanted to note that the applicant or the business owner in this case has already installed both signs. Next slide, please. The property is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and has the following entry. This 1920 church replaced an 1886 building destroyed by fire. This pyramid roof tower at the corner, large Gothic window to the south, and series of Gothic arches to the west are important features of this limestone church. Next slide, please. So first I will review the signage at the intersection, but the following comments will also apply to the sign facing Coburn Street, which will be covered in the next slide. This building has maintained its historic exterior throughout a couple changes and internal use changes, and this proposal intends to continue this trend while increasing the visibility and legibility of a new hotel/apartment use. The increased visibility of both secondary entrances, so along Queen Street and on Coburn Street, which you'll see in just a moment, resulting from the new signage should not negatively impact the prominence of the main entrance that faces Clergy Street East, as that entrance has a very prominent staircase, decorative fenestration, and a grand wooded door, or pair of doors. And the new signage is required to have been anchored to the building in accordance with the city's masonry policy for reversibility and preservation purposes. This is a condition of approval. Further, the size and design of these signs are appropriate for the building and subtly support users' wayfinding. Next slide, please. Similar to the signage facing the intersection, this sign facing Coburn Street should not negatively impact the prominence of the main entrance that faces Clergy Street while increasing the legibility of the commercial use. This sign should also have followed the city's masonry policy. Next slide, please. So here is the recommendation for the 2 signs. The one on the intersection will be larger than the one on Coburn Street, which makes sense because that one on the intersection is more of the main entrance. Next slide, please. And these are the recommendations. And I wanted to highlight that the masonry policy should have been followed when attaching the signs and is a condition of approval. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Philip. Committee members, questions, comments, thoughts, suggestions? Seeing none, I believe we still have no members of the public. So we'll go on to looking for a mover and a seconder for the motion as printed at present. 2 conditions. Councillor Doherty and Jennifer Demeter. Questions, comments, thoughts on the motion? Don Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I just want to clarify. So is this another one of these applications where the work proceeded and now people are looking to have it approved? And if so, and I caught the language about according to the masonry policy, but that would be, to my mind, an alarming trend to start going into, where people are going to proceed and then ask for permission afterwards. And I think there was one at last meeting. So can we just have a quick comment to that? And then I'm fine with it if it's all through the goalposts.
Yeah. So Philip, what will happen here, in fact, if this is approved?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you are correct there, Mr. Mitchell. It was installed before permission was granted. And I would agree that if this trend did continue, it would be problematic. What was the second question again? My apologies.
What do we now do, I think is... So are you going to make them rehang the sign, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That's a great question. We have not looked into specifics of an enforcement case on this yet. However, there are a number of changes to the building that we are exploring and are aware of at this time. So I can't comment definitively, but I do want to mention that we are aware of it, and it's on our radar.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Campbell.
Hi, thank you. Through you. I just wanted to add a little bit to what Philip just shared, which is appropriate in the context of this application. But just adding to that, I think the committee has seen now a number of applications where we have had essentially application after the fact. We're not immune or unaware of the problem that is being perpetuated here. And I would just like to add to committee that we are always in discussion about enforcement. We often cannot always share the details of those discussions with committee for reasons that are legal in their root. But we are also exploring other options moving forward for how we can help to get ahead of this and when necessary, intervene after the fact in a more effective way in terms of ensuring that we're not just setting up a system where people can request forgiveness after the fact. So I did want to share that. And I also wanted to say, not specific to this application, but we also are seeing, I would say, a modest increase in the number of property owners who are coming in with increased awareness of the requirements.
Okay.
And so that actually does set up an interesting system where work that may have proceeded in the past with a lack of awareness is now coming forward in stream or in consideration or even after. And so we want to support those applicants into compliance in future. And again, not specific to this application per se, but did want to share that with committee that is actually a sign in some regard of increasing awareness of responsibility to heritage homes when you do have to come to committee and perhaps then also have to put your hand up on work that you perhaps should have been at committee with before. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. We were in the middle of discussing a motion which was proposed by Councillor Doherty, seconded by Jennifer. Any further discussion? Don Taylor.
This is sort of in a follow-up to Jennifer's comment. I guess the last meeting and this meeting, we've had sort of late applications. And I sense that in both cases, there was really economic necessity. Those restaurants had to have a functioning patio or face serious economic problems. And I suspect in this case, this hotel had to be functioning and a delay of 2 or 3 months in getting a sign approved could be very serious. So to some, there's some sympathy for the applicants in those cases, but I'd like to think that we could find a better mechanism for dealing with this kind of emergencies. Not an emergency in terms of water leaks or something like that, but it's an economic emergency. And in both of these cases that I mentioned, I think the design could have been improved if they had consulted us. And, I just don't know how to deal with this, but it just seems a pity that applicants are sort of almost forced into doing things that are regrettable in terms of heritage and so on. And we don't have any way of trying to help them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thought you were going to say it's regrettable that they don't come to the meetings to make some sort of an apology. But okay, further discussion on the motion on the floor. And seeing that, then the motion is unamended. The 2 clauses and the 6 conditions moved by Councillor Doherty, seconded by Jennifer Demeter. Those in favour of the motion, if you can raise your hand. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Thank you. 9. Aye. Good. Thank you all. Carry, and those opposed, which will be a 0. So it's 9-0 and is carried. And Philip, we stay with signage, but move on to 320 King.
Hello again, everyone, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we will be continuing the theme of signage for now. So this application at 320 King Street is to install 2 signs, a mast arm sign and a typical wall sign in the Market Square Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. 320 King Street East is part of the Masonic buildings and is located mid-block between Brock and Clarence Street along the western boundary of the Market Square Heritage Conservation District, as you can see in the pictures above. Next slide, please. 320 King Street is part of a 3-story Italianate-influenced brick building with arched window openings with buff-colored arches, which is characteristic of John Power. Next slide, please. Property is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and has the following relevant attributes. The building is divided into 10 equal bays with regularly spaced segmented headed windows and horizontal stone banding, and has arched window openings with buff colored brick arches and quinted edge treatment. My apologies for that word. Next slide, please. So as we can see here in the picture, before I discuss a bit further, the original sign area, which is shown in the picture to the right, is actually going to be moved up a little bit. Instead of being on the Springer, it's going to be just above it, anchored in the masonry joint. So the new signage is a neutral, reversible impact that will not detract from the district nor the existing heritage building. The proposed signage is not on the prohibited HCD plan list, does not result in excessive signage, and will not cover any heritage attributes of the building. Signage is appropriately located between the 2 bays corresponding to this business and has a scale and design that is generally compatible with the building in the district. The wall sign and mast arm sign will be attached via fasteners into the masonry, or to the mortar joints as guided by the city's masonry policy. And while a plastic sign is not the optimal material choice, the matte finish should reduce additional glare to maintain the building's prominence. And staff will also be provided with a picture of the finalized signage prior to installation, which is a condition of approval. This type of signage is associated with a new business operating at this location, which maintains the business's or the building's historic commercial use. Next slide, please. So importantly, I highlighted the word quote unquote on because this is meant to say above to align with the rest of the language in the approval and that picture in the preceding slide. This will be changed prior to council review as it is a typographical error, and I wanted to draw your attention to that. Next slide, please. And finally, I wanted to highlight that staff will be provided with pictures of signage prior to installation to make sure it is suitable for the district. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Philip. My apologies in forgetting to remind you that this is in fact a part 5, so the motion cannot be amended, but the typo can be corrected before it goes on to council. Members, your dash comments have been correctly recorded, I hope. And I'd certainly invite all members to make comments on dash. If you're not sure how to, get in touch with Elizabeth and she will take you through the process. But it's nice to see them. Members of the public, and hearing none, I presume not. Committee members, questions? And seeing no movement, then looking for a mover and a seconder for the motion as printed. Jennifer Demeter, and a seconder, Don Mitchell, thank you. Your hand on, sorry, gets lost in your books. That's why I keep on missing you. Further discussion? Seeing none, then we will vote on that motion. Moved by Jennifer, seconded by Don Mitchell. Those in favour, if you can raise your hand or call out.
Aye.
And those opposed? And that carries by 9-0. As thank you very much. We move down to the Heritage Kingston Review Working Group. Which I've got to find. There we are. And I believe this needs to be received. Is that right, Madam Clerk? I always forget on these ones.
Yes, please, Mr. Chair.
So if there are questions on it, otherwise looking for a mover and a seconder to receive this report. Don Mitchell and Don Taylor, thank you. Councillor Doherty, I was just slow on you. Any questions? This is an old one because in fact the review has now come to the committee and this talks about it going to the committee, so it's a little bit beyond. Seeing none, then we have a motion to receive it. Those in favor of receiving the...
Aye.
Those opposed? And that carries by, again, 10-0. Emergency approvals, Ryan?
None to report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. There are no motions. Any notices of motion? Other business then? No, sorry, any other business? And correspondence, and I'm going to make a comment on one of the correspondences. This is 12B. And Ryan, it's not a request to you, but it's a comment. 241 Glengarry. I hope that you will receive those notes because in fact there's more to this little house than is mentioned in the letter. If any of you have read Marilyn Simon's Gutenberg's Fingerprint, you'll know that Hugh Barclay is critical in her story there. And it also explains how he not only designed the house, but designed a special chair for his wife to get around the house. And it really becomes a fascinating little property. We have one other like it in town, and my memory is that it's 188 Frontenac, which came to this, it must be designated because Don Taylor will remember it coming to this committee years ago for an addition. And the front part of the house also was designed in the 1930s for accessibility. And I think they should be noted somehow and somewhere, though certainly not as a, probably as a heritage building. 34 Clarence Street, I believe that staff are looking at that concern. And you have a Heritage Matters. Anything I've missed out from the correspondence? Anything else that's been missed out? If not, August the 17th, our next meeting, which is planned to be the last complete Zoom meeting in September. We should be moving back into the council chambers if you want to. We'll have a hybrid meeting. I'll talk about that a little bit in August. Missing anything? If not, looking for a mover to adjourn. Jane, Don Taylor, those in favor, we don't have to vote. Well, we will vote. Those in favor of adjourning at 10:57. Thank you all very, very much. Enjoy what looks like a reasonable day out there and another month of summer. So thank you all.